Shereener Browne, who is the founder of Orisun, which is a theatre company that gives a stage and a voice to Black and Afro-Caribbean actors here in London. And really appreciated Shereener's energy and her wit, and I think it was a really lovely chat because we were able to touch on, I think, how we take for granted certain ways that we view the world and consume the world, in everything from Hollywood and film and theater to public policy and drug policy, and we talked a bit about just generally the judicial system. And I think it was a really nice way to tie in collectively what we're doing with the brave and good work that she's doing with Orisun.
And I thought it was beautiful to see someone who had been a barrister for 20 years and who's a mother of 3 children to take on a project like this and to just understand the importance of it and just run with it, and that I think that shows a lot of courage.
So Shereener, you run an organization called Orisun.
It's Orisun.
Orisun.
But I always mispronounce it because it is Yoruba. It's a Yoruba word, which is
Nigerian. Yes.
And I'm not Nigerian, at least maybe sometime back in my ancestry, probably. So I always mispronounce it, and I pronounce it as Orisun, but it's Orisun.
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 It's quite French, like a French.
Yeah, there's an accent on the I, and maybe that's. So the emphasis should be ori, and then the last syllable kind of disappears. Is eaten up. Yes. Okay.
And it's a theatre company.
It's a theatre company. Yes.
And tell us a little bit about it, because when we met, I remember thinking, wow, that's amazing. She's a lawyer, but she's and a mother and multiple children running around, and then also now you've started this theatre company.
Yeah. So
how does a lawyer get interested in creative?
Well, I think it's the other way round. Well, I know it's the other way around because when I very much was a sort of singing, dancing, performing child, but growing up in a working class Caribbean household where there was an emphasis on education, and so it was never going to be a thing that I go and sing and dance and perhaps pretend to be somebody else for a living, and so that's where the law came in. It was it was quite prestigious in Caribbean families to either be a lawyer or a doctor, and I had the gift of the gab, chat a lot. I was called Chatterbox, and so I was a bit of a storyteller, a persuader, and that's essentially what a lawyer is. And so that's how I got into the law. But so getting into law put on the back burner my initial sort of, I don't really want to call it a passion, but I guess it is, because I think that word is often misused, overused. But I think that's probably accurate. That's really what I wanted to do. I just dreamt about it, I mean, literally, I wanted to be Irene Cara in Fame. So law put that on the back burner for a very long time, actually. So it was, I was 23 years this year. I've been a barrister. Wow. And I took up acting about 3 years ago.
Okay.
So I literally sort of fell back into it. I thought it would be a good way to help me teach other barristers advocacy skills, because that's one of the things that I used to do. I used to train junior barristers on how to on public speaking in courtrooms effectively.
Okay.
And I thought
so you were training them how to more effectively convince someone,
a judge or a jury. And I thought doing an acting course, a short acting course, would help me help them. And then I thought, actually, I'm quite enjoying this.
You're subconscious is kind of like...
Yeah.
Yeah, did you trick yourself maybe into
Totally.
that?
Yeah, I did.
Totally will help me.
I did. I completely tricked, because I suppose part of me was pretending that I didn't really want to do it, and that the reason I'm doing this is to help my students.
Yeah.
Yeah, but my subconscious had other
that's
plans and did a hijack, and that's how it all started.
That's amazing. Do you think that did you have some thoughts that, you know what, actually, like, I did have this thing that I liked and I wanted to do a long time ago, or had you, where was your relationship with acting at that point? Because you said 23 years by then.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd sort of forgotten about it and had convinced myself, as I suppose a lot of us do when we get on this sort of earning treadmill, a career treadmill, and I was earning a good living as a barrister. And then you get all the trappings associated with that. You get the car, the house, and the mortgage, and whatever. And there's very little time to actually pause and think, is this still what I want to do? And actually, the pause that came along was my third child. I mean, I had, child number 3 came along, and he's learning disabled, and I couldn't do this full-time, high-flying criminal advocate career anymore. He needed my attention, so I couldn't give full attention to both. So I stopped being a full-time barrister, and I was a full-time mother for probably sort of 6 to 7 years, but still dabbled in law, but nowhere near as in at the same level or intensity as I did before he was born. And that actually gave me the space and the time to think about whether I really wanted to get back into that, whether I was really happy, actually.
Right. You had the space to just reflect and say, actually...
And I realised I wasn't happy. I mean, I there was aspects of being a criminal barrister that I enjoyed, don't get me wrong, and I did feel fulfilment to a certain extent, but I wasn't truly happy doing it.
Was there something that you could look at specifically and say, was there a moment where you said, oh yeah, that thing, I remember that thing, actually, that sucked? Or... Yeah, there was actually. I was pregnant with my third child, and I was doing this trial up in Manchester, so I was heavily pregnant, away from home. I was feeling a bit sorry for myself, and I was quite sick with the pregnancy as well. And I was defending a young man who at the time was, I think he was about 15 or 16, and he was facing life imprisonment.
Wow.
And he was convicted, as he was going to be, because the evidence was overwhelming. And there came a time when I had to go to his mother, who was the same age as me, and tell her that the next time her son would be free would be about when he was 34. And I couldn't do it. I had to go to the loo. I had a moment with myself where I cried. And then sort of sorted myself out, and came and spoke to the solicitor and said, could you speak to her with me? And I just didn't want to do the job anymore. I felt very strongly that I was in the wrong part of the criminal justice system. By the time young men came to me, it was far too late. And that I wanted to be involved at a different level or a different stage. But I just didn't want to have anything else to do with this. And that was the moment. That was the moment when I thought, I'm going to do something else. And even though after I had Amari, and he had learning difficulties, he's got learning difficulties, I still was doing law, but I didn't go back to crime. I did employment law.
Right.
I just didn't feel I could go back to crime at all.
Yeah, because you also had the experience now of the motherhood, right?
Yes, I think that definitely was thrown into the mix there. It was, from one mother to another. It was just heartbreaking to tell her. He had done some very bad things.
Yeah, sure.
But it was actually more complicated than that. That there were. At the time, Manchester was struggling with really high levels of gang violence, and sort of not dissimilar to what's going on now in London.
Yeah.
And the picture wasn't a simple one about a choice of becoming a criminal. It was one that was tinged with poverty quite grinding poverty.
I bet.
Which, forced, young men's hands to earn money in a quick way. Not condoning it.
Sure.
But that's the background.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's always complicated. People don't make choices like that.
No.
It normally is a continuation of little small things that keep accumulating, and then something just materializes that is just over the top, and then
Yeah.
So that means you wanted to start earlier to.
Yeah, I mean, there was part of me that flirted with the idea of becoming a social worker, whether that's really where my skills best lay. But I don't think that's my personality. And in a way, what I'm now trying to do through the theatre company Orisun is to using art to tackle some of those issues and to shine a light on them. So one of the plays that we're dealing with producing at the moment deals with racial stereotyping and adolescent mental health, and explores the relationship of two teenage black boys and how society's view of them pushes them into a particular trajectory that then spirals into criminality and mental health issues and that sort of thing.
Was the it's interesting because we were having a conversation earlier about kind of the regenerative or degenerative nature of the judicial system and the prison system, and actually it's not a very understanding. It's a bureaucracy, so it's not a very empathic. Okay, I could understand why you would make this decision. It's not condoned, but there's maybe a process by which we could restore, or there could be a form of therapy, anyways.
Yeah.
I guess the play is maybe not looking at that, but what is the circumstances by which?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yes, you're right. The play isn't looking at that particularly, about the sort of interaction with the criminal justice system. But it's definitely, the angle of the play is definitely to make audiences think about more empathetically, as you say, about what moves an individual to behave in a particular way. And I think we're quite, as a society, certainly in this country, quite unforgiving of our young people. We're very hard on them, I think. And the criminal justice system is not the place for them. Even the ones who, in fact, not even the ones who've done really bad things. Those are the ones that really need the support most, and it's therapy they need. It's a therapeutic environment, not punitive.
Yeah.
And we've completely gone down the punishment. I mean, as a country where we have the lowest, I think, in Europe. We have the lowest age of criminal responsibility in Europe.
What is it?
It's 10.
10?
10? Really?
Yes, it's 10.
Wow, that's crazy.
It is crazy.
I think it's 16 in Portugal.
Yeah, I mean, the continent is far more progressive than we are, but 10.
That's
10 is the age of criminal responsibility in this country, yes.
How does that even make any sense?
I know. I mean, have you seen a 10-year-old lady?
Exactly.
They do the dumbest stuff.
Of course.
Is the point of that to put the emphasis on parenting? Or is that really just like we hold you, an 11-year-old, the same way we hold a 19-year-old the same way?
I mean, you would think that was the point, but it's not. The parents are obviously dragged along through the criminal justice system with the child, but it's the child who is taken away and put in custody. The difference is they're not put in prison. They're put in secure accommodation, but it's the same as prison. It's just called a different thing.
Yeah. Do you feel like your years of being in the judicial system have now they're shaping the way that you are making the art and that you are what you're wanting to produce? Because it sounds like in this case that you're obviously looking at young black males who maybe have been some of the same people that you've.
Yes. Yeah. It's definitely shaped the person I am as an artist. definitely. And I'm also sort of kind of pushing back against it.
Yeah.
In a way.
How so?
Because I realise that we have all these rules and and laws and statutes, but I'm questioning how effective they are. In reducing crime and exposing the causes of crime and trying to tackle that. I just don't think it's effective.
Do you have an example of one that comes up for you pretty often?
What, an example from my own career?
Or from law, or just your experience with the legal system, where you say that's clearly not working.
Well, I mean, I think just generally the statistics shows that it's not working. I mean, because crime rates don't reduce every time a government brings in sort of like a zero tolerance approach or sentencing initiative. Yeah. It doesn't bear fruit. It doesn't result in a reduction in crime. And in fact, what does approaches that were like in Glasgow, there was an approach where they, instead of punishing, what they did is they gathered the members of the community who were involved in crime and said, look, let's see how we can reduce this by diverting funds into youth clubs, education, and they saw a massive fall in violent crime, drug use, gang crime, and I think we might be catching on to that, but it's a bit late in the day. But I don't know how it will take off.
I mean, it just reminds me of the example of decriminalization in Portugal back in, when was it, like the late 80s? Mm-hmm. We were like the most heroin addicted country in Europe.
Wow, I didn't know that.
And we tried a bunch of different things, and which were first, you had like these rooms where you could go and like they would give you like clean methadone, like whatever. But they realized that what was happening is that you're basically just shoving a problem to the side under the carpet. Yeah. And you're segregating these people actually, rather than helping them out. They didn't see any success in people getting free of that. Mm-hmm. And then eventually we passed a law that was to decriminalize all drugs in Portugal. All drugs.
In the 1980s?
I think it was 90s. But
wow.
Because in the 80s
that's
it was
progressive.
Yeah. It's like, I think, don't quote me on that,
but certainly within your lifetime, because you remember it.
I mean, what happened was the decrease was insane, like never seen before. What we do now is you can have drugs as long as you don't have enough amount that it's considered
to deal.
That's not a crime. That is, you will if a cop sees you in the street with doing like injecting or whatever, they will go to you and they will let you know that there's these spaces and these places where you can get help. There are social workers working with these cases, and in one generation, it just disappeared, the whole problem. Wow. And it was exactly the opposite of war on drugs.
Which isn't working.
No.
It's not working.
No.
It's interesting because it feels like there are these policies, social policies, legal policies that they don't. It doesn't seem like they require much, but from a mindset point of view, that's a massive. It's a massive shift, right? Like even I'm just thinking about social spaces or public spaces, like in Brazil, in Curitiba, for example, or in Bogota, you had really progressive mayors who were doing really simple things with public transportation. We're creating more space for public transportation. We're limiting private transport, and had massive impacts, positive impacts on the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere, general positivity in public spaces,
well-being, mental health, everything.
And it just required one shift in mindset around even like within a quite a particular niche, you know, like in this case drugs, public space, maybe, you know, obviously young people.
I absolutely agree with you. I just don't know whether the people at the top are interested in making such a shift. I think they.
But I think they would if like the public opinion changed. You know.
Well, if there was more debate and free debate around it, then and so that the public could be better informed about the issues, then I think that's right. I think the public would agree with a new approach. But at the moment, what is very much in vogue is this, tough on crime, tough on the causes of crime, I think was one conservative mantra back in the sort of 90s. And that is very much still on the front runner, I think, and what is driving public policy around the criminal justice system. But so, sort of the overlap between my legal entity or identity and my artistic one is it's very much exploring some of those themes through art,
You're
through theatre.
specifically working with young black men.
Well, the project that I mentioned, which is a play called Play Fight, where just in the last stages of we've got a final draft of that play, and during the research and development of that play, we had young black men come and workshopped ideas, which then fed into the writing process. And what we would like to do, money willing, funding willing, is to run workshops alongside the play, to workshop the themes with young people in the community. Because that's what we did with one of our workshops. We had two young men who weren't actors. Actually, one of them was my son and his friend, and they came into the space, and it completely changed the dynamic. Because obviously, as actors, we're very much as we try to convince ourselves that we're portraying real life and convincingly, and I'm sure we are. It's completely different when somebody of that life then comes into the room and responds the way they would respond, not the way an actor thinks they would respond. And the power of that exercise was not just to inform the writing, but just actually it made us think, gosh, wouldn't it be wonderful if we could get more young people just to come into the that sort of environment where they're not judged and they're allowed to express themselves and just see what happens.
That's kind of what happened at City of God. City of God, the movie, like Brazilian from I think the 90s. It's an unbelievable movie, and all the actors in that movie were kids from the favela.
Yes, I did see that movie actually.
And all of them, actually, most of them actually became actors, which is incredible. I mean, of course, the movie was it's one of my favorite movies of all time. Yeah. But it's interesting that he took that. He didn't want to work with professional actors at all. He wanted to get.
I mean, that would be my next step. I would like to have. Certainly, what we do at Orisun when we're auditioning, we don't. There's less emphasis on your CV. So whether you've actually been to drama school, because I haven't been. I didn't go to drama school, obviously, and so I'm very open to actors who've trodden a different path. So certainly, we've always emphasised, if you're going to audition for us, we're not really that much bothered about what you've done. We just want to see what you can do, and we don't care how you've gotten to that point, as long as it's good.
Which I guess also, for it just makes it more approachable for those kind of people to also be willing to say that they want to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what we have found already, just we've been up and running about a year, is that the actors we've worked with were just completely moved by the whole process. That they were in an audition room that was quite relaxed and open, not just like a sort of panel of judges went to hit the air button. It wasn't, people messed up. We said, okay, just breathe, start again.
It felt safe.
Yeah, and that's how you get the best out of people, actually. It's not, to take the stress out of it.
Of course.
And, our young actors are saying to us that, they haven't been involved in a process like that before. And also, we gave them opportunity to play roles that they don't normally get asked to play as young black actors, which again was lovely feedback for us to get. So,
Of course.
What challenged the group when you had these young people come in, and you said that there were things that we took from them that we maybe hadn't realized, or actually we would have said things a bit differently? Were there things that you were really?
Yeah, the first big and obvious point was that they just responded in a very different way. It was, I don't know, if you've ever seen a toddler start to walk or a child run, how free and open it is. It's usually barefoot or something, and maybe their arms are out.
Yeah.
And
they might fall.
But get back up. And it was like that. So it was this sort of untrained response. Once they got over the sort of initial, there was a bit of giggles, and obviously, because they were teenagers. But once they got over that, then what we got was these very open and vulnerable responses to what was being said or what was being asked of them in the room, and that was very, it was very moving, actually. We did a sort of a scene that we just completely improvised, where a young woman was at the funeral for her son, and then we got the two young men to come and offer condolences, and it just completely went off in a way we didn't expect. She was angry, and then they got defensive, and then they got angry, and the tension was in the room kind of ramped up. But also the emotions, everybody was quite damp-eyed, and some people were openly crying at the end of it.
You've got a genuine expression of emotions,
and it was genuine.
Complex interplay of personal expression.
Yeah. Did they have any sort of similar experience with that in their real lives?
Well, I don't think one of them was my son, so I know he hasn't been in a sort of a situation where he's gone to a friend like that, but I know in their wider circle they have. And that's stuff that we can't, we don't have access to as actors, particularly if you've been to RADA. I suspect that perhaps you haven't come across that.
What's funny is I play guitar in a group, but I'm not classically trained. I've played for some time, but I play my own way, and which is a collection of things that I've heard and seen. And I was talking to someone who was classically trained recently, a guitarist, and we were saying, let's jam, let's hang out and jam. And I said, this is what you should expect from me, because I've got a sensitivity around the music, because I'm not a musician, And he says, oh no, I also get a bit nervous when I play with non-musicians or people who haven't been trained, because he was worried because he knows that I'm going to bring something that he doesn't quite bring, which is this kind of freedom, or is this kind of non-linearity to the process, and he said he found that a bit intimidating, and so there was this kind of we had this thing.
That's so interesting. I wouldn't think that he would go through that process. You probably didn't think that.
No, I had but it makes sense though. And I was thinking about it. I was like, okay, well, actually, I've also played with other people who haven't trained classically, and they're really extraordinary, and maybe on a different level than I. And I don't know what's the more intimidating bit, but I could see.
But it is interesting, because you would think that, and I think that's very much the sort of the drama school story, in that if you've gone to a particular drama school, it gives you that confidence that you can do it.
Yeah.
which is priceless.
Well, I mean, to be fair, like I went to uni for film production, and like I didn't feel like that at all.
Really?
Yeah, not at all. I felt like, I'm not saying that the school had bad courses or whatever. It's just that I feel it's a kind of endeavor that you actually learn by doing, rather than
absolutely.
And it isn't like what do you call it? Yes, there are physical things that you do, but there are a lot of underlying skills that you need to like experience through like making mistakes and stuff like that. Especially people interacting with people and you know, like you were saying, like making people be comfortable. Like there's a whole well of things that cannot be taught. Like
on a course.
Yeah, on a course.
Yeah, I agree with that. But I think we live in a society that has to monetize everything, and so
you need a diploma for everything, you know.
If you teach yourself, no one's making money out of that.
And also here, in this country more than where I'm from, you have to have these levels of accomplishment as well. Like you've got to have your level 1, your level 2, your level 3. And actually, people are concerned about that on some level. Whereas, you know, if I show up and say, "Well, I'm a facilitator and a coach," someone's going to ask me, "Well,
where did you train?
What's your certification?" You know, and part of that is useful. And
but I think this is not for everything. I think like my job, I never got asked anything.
What's your job?
I make videos.
Oh right.
I'm a filmmaker. So it's way more about, because I guess it's different because you can actually see what I make, you know, like it's very clear.
Yes.
Like who cares if you got like a master's in cinematography if your images look terrible? Like you just want to see the video. If it looks great, then awesome. I want to work with you. If not, so for me, like I didn't have that experience, and I also got a friend. Simon, who was not like trained, and yet he was able to start a few companies, and like he just does his thing, you know. So I mean, like, so I don't know. I found it like in Portugal, I'd imagine like everybody just gets masters. Like it's just so normal. Like every single one of my friends got masters, and like some of them are like literally doing barista jobs, and it's like what?
It's a European thing, I think.
It's so strange.
I mean because when I did my degree many moons ago, you know, everybody got a degree, so then everybody had to get a master's. I mean, what do people get? I mean, I've met quite a few PhD candidates lately, so maybe that's the next step.
Well, the bachelor's has definitely been cheapened. I mean, like. The universities, I think, have done something quite tricky, which is like, and it's a bit deceptive and a bit, I think, in some instances quite gross, which is like the quality. I've been in some master's programs where I've been supporting, whether doing feedback or some design stuff, and I've just been a bit appalled at the quality of master's levels education, and it feels like a bit of a money grab of like we're just getting whoever we can into get their bachelor's, and even the master's levels, at least like in some universities here, it's like, well, how many international students can we get in, because they bring a bit more. Maybe the quality of education then can't be that high because it's working with students who don't actually speak the language completely, and so there's a whole thing with education right now that's like it's a bit kind of
I mean, and it's a trickle down effect as well. I think it trickles down to sort of primary and secondary education as well. I mean, certainly, I mean, I've got 3 children, and given the spread of ages means that I've been able to sort of, you know, see closely primary and secondary education over the past 10 years, and I've definitely seen a change. I've seen a change in the quality of the teaching, in what is being taught, you know, more and more emphasis on just passing tests and exams. You know, one story my daughter told me, who's doing her GCSEs at the moment, was that I can't remember whether it was Macbeth or another classical text that she was being taught for an exam, and they were told not to read the whole book. They were just told to read excerpts that they would be tested on. I was in shock. I thought she was winding me up, but no, that's true.
So the teachers are gaming the system.
Well, I think the teachers, I have a bit of sympathy for them, because I think
it's hard,
they have got, sort of a hard test themselves. If they don't get a certain amount of students through this test, then they don't tick the boxes, then their job is on the line. So I don't feel as though they have the freedom to teach the subject in the way they would want to teach it.
I think the bureaucracy is become way more than it used to be. I mean, my mom is a kindergarten teacher, and she tells me, like, it's insane. Like, they're kids. Let me do my job. Like, if I
let
spend
them enjoy learning. I mean, is that a thing anymore? The love of learning. Remember that? It seems to have been really leached out of it.
It's really sad too, because I think it goes back to what you're saying about criminalization. It's this complete lack of a systems approach to the way that we are shaping our society. It's like, okay, well, there's some standards for how we educate kids, which is why we have this Ofsted thing, and they come into the school, and they're going to come in once a year or once every 2 years, and they're going to see, are you teaching the right way, and are you doing all the paperwork, and are you teaching that bit of Macbeth? And actually what you're doing is creating test takers, and you're creating rational test takers, because we've cut performance, we've cut softer skills more and more, so you're creating this stronger rationalist paradigm of test takers, which is actually
like zero use in real world.
And becoming less.
It's very useful as a workforce.
But maybe
because that's what you want. You want people who are going to hit targets.
But maybe becoming less and less useful though, because of automation, because of.
Yes, well, we have that. That's the biggest. That's, I suppose, the biggest challenge on the horizon. You know, because even aspects. I used to think, the legal world was safe, but even aspects of legal jobs are being automated now.
Yeah, because it is the kind of Oxbridge paradigm of taking in information and then processing information and feeding out. And this is the kind of rationalist left brain that we are focusing on. And I think it's a systems issue. It's like going back to what you said about criminalization. It's like, well, actually, is punitive action and punishment the way that we are going to help this person overcome the difficulties that they've experienced in their life?
It's kind of paradoxically also that they have so much data, they create all of this bureaucracy, and then clearly things aren't working. They aren't using that same data that they have been enforcing,
I mean, it's it can
it's
be,
a big topic anyway.
It can be quite overwhelming and quite sad and depressing.
But I guess in Orisun is it sounds like it's in some way a kind of response to that, which is actually a young person is really complex, and this is just obviously one facet of this kind of totality of life. But this person is nuanced and is really intelligent in its own way. And just shoving this kid in the penitentiary or whatever is actually not helpful for him, for his family, his community, society in the long run. Yeah,
and I feel strongly that that theatre and film, as they're such powerful mediums. I mean, you mentioned City of God. I mean, we probably could all talk about a film that's really moved us, and I do go to the theatre a lot, and I just think it's a really powerful way to demonstrate, sort of those issues. And I just think of it as another form of advocacy for me. The form that I was raised on in my working career was in a very austere and in a courtroom. But this is persuasion and storytelling, but on a stage. So I feel yes, Yeah.
You know.
I mean, I like to think that when I was a criminal advocate, I did it in a sort of storytelling way. I think the best criminal advocates were definitely of that persuasion. They were storytellers, and the facts that our clients' lives were the story that we were telling. And those were definitely the best advocates, you know.
I mean, the thing with that I find interesting about storytelling and writing, and it's you can actually express a lot more things that maybe you wouldn't be able to express just by talking. You know, like poetry is not the same thing as you know, like you in a court of law explaining something, but there are things in a poem that are not really expressible in that way, you know?
Yeah, and also the things that aren't said, you know, the things that aren't said in the poem, but are hinted at.
Yes,
sometimes
exactly.
That is far more powerful.
That's what I mean.
You know, and seeing, you know, what an actor does on screen, as opposed to what they're saying. Yeah,
there's a nuance that doesn't exist in more strict forms of communication, I think.
Yeah.
What do you think you've learned in that regard since you've started Orisun about producing and writing, and now you are obviously acting? What have you learned about communication and how you can convey something?
Yeah. What I've learned is about listening. Actually, you know, that there's a power sometimes in just, you know, in listening or being quiet and doing very little. I think that's been my single most quite powerful piece of learning since I've started this, you know, this creative aspect of my journey in life, is that you can convey so much with very little. You know, with, you know, the human body, and we're so expressive and, you know, just in a touch and, you know, a turn of the head or something in the eyes it's quite powerful. And that's definitely one of the things that I have learnt, and that I hope to be able to, you know, demonstrate through my theatre work.
So what are you actually doing in the theatre? So are you writing and acting?
No, I don't write.
Okay.
Although many people keep saying, why don't you? But I'm very good at coming up with ideas. I'm like, I've got loads of them.
You're a sub-writer.
Yeah, so Play Fight actually came out of an idea that I had, but I didn't write it. We've got a very talented writer, Christina Alagrathnam, who wrote it. Okay. But it was my idea. I was like, I've got this idea.
Which is important.
Yeah,
it's important to know.
But, you know, I mean, there are lots of ways of creating theatre work. So, you know, I don't know, down the line we might do a sort of more devised, which is sort of like getting actors in the room and, you know, telling the story and then writing it down.
Sort of like working the story around the
actor. Yes.
Yeah.
But so what I'm doing with Orisun is, at the moment, I mean, it's very much a sort of growing thing, is, we've identified writers and I've come up with the ideas, one of them, and then we get the writers and we get actors in the room and we see if we can inform the process that way. One of the reasons I started the theatre company was to provide more opportunities for African and African Caribbean actors to perform in non-stereotypical roles. And because what I found as an actor in my 40s was that there weren't very many roles for me. And in fact, over the last couple of weeks, I screenshot a couple of I'm on this platform which will remain nameless for now, but maybe actors out there will know it. And they send me alerts for jobs. And in the last 2 weeks, I've got one for a single mother whose son is a drug dealer. And what was the other one? Was the other one a maid? I want to say it was a maid. So that's just to give you an idea of the paucity of roles available for a black woman of my age. And so one of the impetus behind Orisun was to create roles for myself, although I haven't been in anything yet. But maybe that will come. Maybe that will come.
So this was a response to, okay, maybe I don't see any roles that I feel like I identify with, and the ones that are coming to me feel like a role that I've seen before that feels a bit feels stereotypical and is maybe not as nuanced as I would appreciate.
Absolutely. It's just that a change really needs to come.
Yeah. What do you think is the importance of that, a kind of narrative that continues to reproduce itself, which maybe not is the full truth, and also a lack of a different example, because there's two things going on there. There's a lack of a different example, and then there's this kind of reinforced example.
Yeah, so I guess the sort of reinforced example, I think, is about the producers, so whether it be theatre producers or film producers, feeling that they know what sells and not wanting to mess with that.
Mm-hmm.
So they just produce the same thing. I mean, they really do. There's very little. I mean, especially in Hollywood. I mean, it's quite shocking, the lack of imagination. And you just think, who comes up with this idea? And, who gave them the money to do this? If they give me a bunch of money. So I think there's a fearlessness around creating work that takes risks, because they're in the business of making money, and this works.
Yeah.
So why change it? And I think what it takes is for just a handful of individuals to just turn that on its head and say, actually, I'm just going to do this, and see if the audience, the paying audience, will be interested in it.
Yeah.
And I think there are examples of filmmakers and writers out there. There's I forgot his name now, it's gone out of my head, who the writer, African American writer who wrote and directed Get Out. Which
and Us.
Yes, yeah. Which I really liked, by the way. I know lots of people didn't. They didn't like it as much as Get Out. To be fair, Get Out I did prefer, but I really liked Us. I think it was.
Are you into thrillers or scary movies?
I used to be. I was, Hellraiser, all those things. I used to be into it. And then I had children, and I kid you not, something chemically changes, which makes you averse to risk and not want to be scared. I'm telling you. Because now I cannot watch those things.
You're in full security mode.
But when I was in my teens and 20s, bring it on. But not anymore. But Get Out was a bit different, because I had to be really talked into watching it, because I was like, if it's like really scary, I'm not going to go for it.
It's interesting. So do you feel like a film like Get Out or Us really challenged it? To be honest with you, I haven't watched neither of them, because I don't like scary movies. But
I've been trying to watch them both, and I still haven't watched. I've watched the trailers, I've watched bits and stuff, but I really want to watch them. They were a revelation for me. To see black actors in that genre of movie was just quite. Yeah, it was a shock. Yeah, I grew up with like Korean movies. I really like Korean movies, really. And I find the whole idea of like horror with like it's just like the cultural imagery that they have and like the way they interact with each other. I just find it so fascinating. Yeah, I find it more scary than anything we like Westerns produce. Oh, absolutely. One of the scariest movies I've ever seen was The Audition. I don't know, which is I think it's Japanese, but it's scary as hell.
Tell us about it.
Oh,
Is the mother.
Yeah, actually, I watched that. That was again before I had children. But just a very, very sick woman who went around torturing people she dated or something. It's just
Sounds
she
great.
did something with acupuncture needles, which meant I have never been able to have acupuncture again. It's seriously scary.
That was like when Hostel came out. Did you ever see Hostel? You were probably a mother by this point. That's why.
You see when those kind of movies, I watch them and I just laugh. I just laugh. Like I just find them like totally comedic. Whereas with like some Korean movies, I'm like, oh my god, this is like I'm pooping my pants,
Hostel was like this. I think it was probably like early 2000s. Horror of young people getting like abducted and kidnapped from hostels and like being sold to people for torture. It was really intense.
Oh my gosh,
but that's like,
that sounds awful.
But it's kind of like he did it like he wanted to be shocking and gory.
It was super shocking,
For the purpose of like, but there's like all like Saw I think started it. There's like Saw started like the horror, which is more like disgust horror. Super gory stuff, super like
but
I don't know.
Nightmare on Elm Street, come on, that was like gore. I mean, it wasn't
that was
done.
Sure.
But it was,
but I don't think you saw him like sawing someone's arm off. It was
Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yeah, but I think there's like horror and terror, and like and terror I find way more scary than horror, because horror is explicit, whereas terror can be something that your mind is creating the rest of the story. So like,
what's an example of a
good
terror film?
If you look over there right now, and there was like a face just looking at you,
sure,
that's terror.
Would you say
if there's a guy coming with a chainsaw and cuts the guy in half, that's horror.
Would you say that terror then would be like what was the one where the guy goes off into the mountains with his wife? He's staying at this.
Antichrist. Is it?
No, the one with Jack Nicholson where he's.
The Shining.
The Shining. Is this like a terror?
Yeah, that's more terror.
Okay.
That's more terror.
But that's sort of like that's supernatural, sort of what they call that sort of psycho.
You don't even know what it is.
That's a really scary movie though.
That one is for you. That was.
I just find those like that cerebral sort of horror like way more terrifying.
You found that one.
I'm going to have to now watch some cartoon on the way back home to try and get that. That was so scary.
So we were on the top.
How did we get onto this?
Because we were talking about how us and
that stereotype.
That challenge, this reinforcement.
Because I said, I was talking to my husband about New Year's resolutions. I don't do those because I'm just never very good at them, so I don't do them. But I did say that this year I'm not going to watch any productions or any movies that don't have a black actor in a lead role. Because I've done that my whole life. I've watched just white people on the screen, and we were my husband, my husband's from the northeast. He's a white Geordie, but our children are brown, and so we were discussing this Christmas about what Christmas movies we can watch that don't just have white characters, and it was a real challenge. We couldn't find it in all my childhood movies that I loved around Christmas. Had just got, white people in there. And I realised that my whole image of happy, beautiful life was completely moulded by Hollywood, which was, but actually, for him as well, it was, this very polished, he's from a working class mining background, And so even for him, it was this unattainable image. So I think for the majority, black and white, what the Hollywood machinery churns out is this, image of unattainable beauty and perfection, which sadly I think, we're all, striving towards, especially the Instagram millennial generation. I think they've just been sold this package.
And it's
they have to look
affecting
a certain way.
and it's affecting mental health big time.
Yeah.
As well.
Yeah, it's a bit enticing. It's an interesting one because there's an element of it which is, at least like the Instagram stuff and the kind of projection of a particular image is in some way is really damaging, and in some ways it can is not so great in terms of an aspiration. But also in some way we are drawn to it in some way, and that's
absolutely.
And there's something quite strangely challenging about that.
I think we're drawn to it because it's human nature. I think it's human nature, and that's the devisers of these platforms. That they've just tapped into this very human aspect of us, which wants to better ourselves generally. So when we're sold or an image is portrayed which we are then told is better, then I think it's human nature to strive towards it. I mean, we all want to better ourselves, whether it's the conditions we're living in or whatever it is.
I mean, there is something for aiming towards like improvement, but then there is also like managing expectations, I guess.
Yes, but there's now we're being sold one story of what improvement or what betterment looks like. It's not about happiness. Let's be clear. It's not about that, because I don't believe for a minute that most of these people are happy at all. Because there's no end. There's no end to it. They achieve something, and then they've got to achieve the next thing, and then the next look, and then the next house,
the next test, the
holiday,
next test, and the next test.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, the test takers.
So I don't think for a minute that they're happy. It's just that we're being sold this lie that happiness looks a particular way.
Yeah. I want to come back to the point about this idea of challenging the narrative, or the kind of like the negation of what's going on. But I think also I'd be curious, there is an industry of happiness now, and it's quite compelling. And we can go on these. We can go to. We can buy our kind of Lululemon and go do a nice yoga session and with the other beautiful people around.
I'm bowing my head in shame.
Well, don't because
I recognise myself.
We all do it.
But the point is that actually there's something useful about it in some way, and actually what is being sold is something that we've been drawn to for a reason. I mean, like, there's something really important about stretching for an hour in silence, and there's something really important about being in nature for a few days. And so in one way we're being drawn to something that is useful, but in a way that is maybe also very capitalist at the same time, right? Yeah. And I just find that point quite interesting, actually, because I think what you said about these images in Instagram or whatever is also that, like you said, we're drawn to this thing which is maybe better in a certain way. Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with that inherently.
Yeah. Well, I think it is really part of the human condition. I think all through history we have wanted to. We've strived to better ourselves. And my mother came to this country because she was told that this was the place where she would better herself. I mean, it's just part of the human condition. So they've actually tapped into that quite successfully, but they've just done it in a way that's quite sinister, because they're selling us one sort of homogenized version of what happiness is. And I think that's probably not accurate.
It's interesting because it's like the immigration thing, I think, is a really useful metaphor, because I'm a second generation immigrant. My mom moved from a village in the south of Italy, and my grandparents, they took a risk, right? And your mom took a risk. And they went to a place that they didn't know. They weren't sure if they were. Well, America in the 50s was maybe a bit different, but it was still a huge risk, and you were taking 8 kids and you didn't speak the language, and et cetera, et cetera. And that's maybe what made it valuable, was that you were putting your skin in the game. Whereas with the kind of kind of just scrolling through images. There's no risk you're taking actually. You're just trying to strive for something where you're not actually. There's no downside to you just scrolling except for your mental health, but you're not thinking about your mental health.
Yeah, and things become meaningless.
I think they do become meaningless.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't want to speak ill of the younger generation because I suspect
but
my parents, I suspect our parents said this similar thing about us,
For sure.
But, and I, we've all done a version of it. I coveted a particular pair of shoes when I was, when I got my first job to the extent that I it's not a thing now, because now you can get everything on credit. But I did layaway, I paid down for these fur-lined boots, which were, far above my financial ability to buy outright. So we've all done it.
Yeah.
So I'm not. It's just that I guess it's the pace of it. I guess I don't know if it's different or quicker and more brutal. I don't know. Because I guess when I was putting my deposit down on my fur-lined boots, I had a place to retreat to. I had the boots didn't follow me on my device, or I would then go and hang out with my mates. We would then go to concerts, but maybe you guys won't do that anyway. So I don't know.
Well, maybe there is something about the pervasiveness of it. I mean, it's just so accessible.
Yeah, it's very accessible.
And the problem is not in the tool, I think. The problem is in the usage of the tool.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, having the capability to buy those fur-lined boots, it wasn't like it's a good thing it's there, like it just gives you the opportunity to, if you want to do something, you can do it. If I want to have an Instagram account that I put, which is what I do, put my portraits in, I do that, but it depends on how you utilize the tool and whether you let that just consume all of your time or not,
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's, I was a latecomer to social media. I joined Facebook in 2017 and Instagram even later than that. I know. I then tried to delete the bloody Facebook account.
It's impossible.
It took me ages.
It's ridiculous.
Until I sent a veil threat saying that it's probably an offence not to allow me to delete my account. But anyway, I'm on Facebook for what it's worth. But one of the good things about it is that I have been able to connect with creatives.
Yeah. So there you go.
I mean, I'm trying to think. There's a couple of projects that are in the sort of in the works for Orisun that have come about because people have seen what we're doing on Instagram and want to work with us.
Amazing.
So it can be a tool for good, but I guess what you say is right. It's learning to moderate your use of it, so that it's not all encompassing.
And it's not even just quantity; it's also the quality, the depth of the things that you are actually trying to put your energy in there.
Yeah.
And I mean, if for a reason, you can get more kids to get to know about it because of social media, then that's great, and you can actually do something with them, which is probably the only way that you're going to reach them.
Absolutely, yeah.
So it's there's nuance, I find.
Yeah, I think also the what seems to be a bit of a thread there is that you have autonomy over what you consume and how you consume, and I think to your point about, all right, I'm just kind of fucking tired of Hollywood films, and I'm going to be really intentional about the stuff that I watch, and I find it a really interesting topic because I'm a white male, and I have in some way grown up, as you said, with that image of what that family looks like, or what that. And not to say that my life looked like that, but also I could at least relate to the fact that I kind of look like that person.
Yeah.
And
I don't know. For me, it was more like, how many movies have you seen with like divorced mothers that are Christmas movies, you know? So like for me, maybe that like I just came to think about those things much later. You know, like I didn't associate because of a completely different thing. So like that wasn't important to me, you know, like it was.
I guess it was a different question, right?
Yeah.
It was a question of, because also I grew up with a single mother, so it was a question of, you know, there's
Is that what a family should look like?
Yeah,
you know, like,
Yeah.
Which is maybe a similar question.
I mean, you did see single mothers portrayed in movies, but they were always the tragic figure, weren't they? Someone needed to rescue them.
in Christmas movies, I don't even. I don't.
Probably not.
I actually can't think of.
Probably not in Christmas movies. But but there is this
Sure,
sort of
sure.
tragic, single mother. There was a whole genre of dating movies in the sort of like 80s that, and there'd be the single, but Jerry Maguire, what am I talking about? Jerry Maguire.
Yeah, Jerry
is
Maguire.
the epitome of that genre. There's the single mother heroine, but she's got to be pure. So her husband died. That's a really good way for her to become a single mother.
That's the only way that works,
Yeah,
right?
that's the only way it works. and then in comes Jerry Maguire to literally sweep her off her feet, and spirit her off to this magical. I mean, it's just.
With Bruce.
But I love that movie.
Oh yeah. with Bruce Springsteen going. I mean, the whole thing is like, it's amazing.
I love that movie. I'm telling you, it's really interesting to watch movies again. After the other day, I watched Pretty Woman.
Actually, when you said the single woman, I mean, she wasn't a mother, but Pretty Woman.
And I was like, fucking hell, this is where it all comes from. Actually, fucking men, because men want women to be whores, but not really whores. They want to marry. They want to marry a sort of like. But Pretty Woman is their ideal. They want someone who is going to service them at home like a whore, but not be a whore.
Yeah, they could take them out and like wear a hat.
Yeah, and they look acceptable to polite society, but then when you get them home, they rip your clothes off and give you a blowjob or something. I watched that and I was like, oh my god, I now get it. I know how confusing for men to want that in one person because it doesn't exist largely.
But it's interesting. We were talking about like how different cultures like
the 80s,
experience like sexuality differently, and like that's like I find that northern countries have got a completely different like way of even talking about those subjects. Like there's always a taboo. Like in like Latin countries, like. It's just a top, like it's like talking about the weather, like it's so natural. It's so it's how do you say it's non-threatening.
Yeah,
like it really is non-threatening.
So the Brits, developed the double entendre. I mean, that's what everything is hinted at when it comes to sex. It's never explicit. It's always there's some innuendo.
And then that's why they're not that famous for having the greatest of or to be the greatest lovers, that is true. Like there like I think that there's I'm not like
one stereotype to another.
I'm not saying that it's a generalization, but there is like definitely some cultural thing there where there's the taboo doesn't facilitate the openness to sex.
But I think the common theme here that we're exploring about the images that you see on social media and other and social platforms, and the images across the decades that have come out from Hollywood, so that they are not reflective of what life is like generally. I mean, there are things around the side. There are good movie makers who do portray. Is it Danny Boyle? I want to say Danny Boyle.
Danny Boyle, the Trainspotting.
Yeah. No, was that Trains?
Yeah.
But, we've got those movie makers who, they're not making the Hollywood blockbusters, but they make good films, good content, which are, reflective of real life. But generally, that's not the case. And is that because the audience, there isn't the viewing audience for it? Do we want to be sold? Do we want to get lost in fantasy?
Yeah. I mean, I think there is like, it comes and goes. It's kind of like fashion. Like like comedy gets into fashion, and then like you get these much lighthearted movies like during the 80s, and like now I think we're in a phase of like pretty lighthearted stuff. Like Everybody's Okay, back in the 80s, like Arnold Schwarzenegger carrying like a big log, and it's ridiculous, but it was fun because it was so over the top, and like people were not taking it seriously. But then like after that came like a much more, everything became very serious. All the movies like the Batman movies stopped being Tim Burton and became like The Dark Knight, which is great. It's a great movie, but it's just like the vibe of the whole thing changed into something more serious.
You're right.
But the thing was about like you didn't going from Tim Burton to The Dark Knight.
No. Process.
No. But what I'm saying is that going from that to that, there's still an archetypal story though. I guess like to your question, we talked about this with Star Wars because there's this. I wouldn't say a controversy, but Star Wars has evolved and changed quite quickly, and it's now. There's been some discussion. Well, it's quite frustrating to see that it's not the same Star Wars from some people, and then other people are excited, obviously, because you start to challenge some of the portrayals, and maybe one doesn't do as well. And I guess like what will tell is the test of time, right? Are these stories that we go back to? Are they human? Are they archetypal? Are we drawn to something specific about these stories? And I think it comes with time. And I don't know the answer to your question, but I feel like we are drawn to some of these narratives. For some.
Yeah, I think you're right. But I guess my point is then there's enough room for both.
Sure.
I mean, because I love fantasy. I mean, Star Wars. I loved Star Wars. I love that movie. It actually came at a time when I actually lived for 5 years on a tiny Caribbean island, and when I moved there was like I think 1 or 2 TV channels, and they weren't full time. And I had this little portable television and a huge hulking video recorder,
Like
VHS. And I brought some videos with me, and one of them was Star Wars. So I watched the trilogy, and I watched them over and over and again. I loved them, and I still do. So I think there's absolutely room for those, sort of fantasy. I'd like to be in one. I wanted to be John Boyega's mum. But anyway, another time, perhaps another saga. But I think there's room for other stories.
That's it.
They just don't get through those other stories. I think, the big budget movies are all these sort of glossy in the main, fantasy. I mean, even the ones that aren't supposed to be fantasy are really fantasy.
Well, when are people going to just stop watching them? Because like they're not, maybe at some point I'm not always a huge fan of Hollywood because for me Hollywood films tend to be, unless they're really challenging, they tend to be really obvious, and they're so obvious at times that you just don't enjoy the watch because you can kind of see it coming, and that line was not real, and which maybe with European films is a bit different.
Yeah, it is.
I don't know what's the. I really don't have a traditional filmology experience because and I didn't used to watch so many movies until I moved to the UK, and then I moved because I studied here, and when I moved I just started devouring movies from all over the world. Like I'm talking like Bollywood to Japan to Russian movies to European I think it's just people are just so used to the Hollywood stuff.
Yeah.
They think that's movies, but it isn't. You know, there's so much interesting stuff out there, you know, and it's like, it's a shame because like you're saying, it becomes quite formulaic, you know, and it's like, why? There is space. There isn't the market, maybe. I wonder if that's the thing.
I don't know. I think sometimes we're, or not we, but the powers that be underestimate the audience. I think. I think they underestimate their ability to, their imagination, their ability to run with a story. You know, I think
even their attention spans. I mean, the podcast, and this is not movies, but podcasts. Like, people thought that people wouldn't watch an hour-long conversation, and look, now we've got podcasts, and like everybody's crazy about podcasts. So it turns out people are actually a lot smarter, and like their attention spans are a lot longer than people have imagined. You know, and it's like it's sort of it's like a subversion of the story that we've been told like the whole time. It's so strange, you know.
Right.
But I guess that's also kind of been the theme of the discussion, which is like, you know, with the kind of the legislation in Portugal, and you know, what are ways that you are flipping the paradigm even just slightly, and I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on Orisun and what your hopes are for that, and obviously you're already doing that with, including real people, including non-actors.
I would definitely like that to be part of our journey, to have you know, to cast people who aren't trained actors. But I mean, you know, what I would like to eventually do. Okay, here it is. This is my big plan.
Let's hear it.
Did you see that light in my eye? Okay, here's. So, I love theatre. I would like to make films too, but theatre is really what I like a lot. I would like Orisun to have a place in South East London, a theatre space, a community hub, a creative hub, where people who normally go to see West End shows come to Deptford and see our shows. That's what, and the people who live around us don't have to, you know, go up into the centre of London to get good theatre. They can just stay in their ends, and then everybody else from Hampstead and wherever can come and see good theatre too. In Deptford. That is, or in New Cross. That is my plan.
Right. That's exciting.
Yeah.
It's a big vision.
Yeah, it's a big vision, but you know, I think you know, whether it, you know, I start it and someone else finishes it, I think it's doable.
Yeah.
I think it's doable.
I think so. I mean, the fact that you've taken a risk and you've done this thing for 20, 30 years, you're a mother, and to all of a sudden say, actually, there's this thing that I think is missing, which is really important, which is challenging the way that we experience people and experience other types of people. And I don't imagine that you doing what you just said is that much further. So, yeah, it's been a joy. Is there anything else that you...
I think I'm happy.
Yeah, me too. I
appreciate
really enjoyed the conversation.
Excellent.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, thanks
for
very much.
coming.
Thanks so much for having us.
It's great.